Welcome to the Irish NFL Show in association with QuinnBet. We're a little over a fortnight at time of recording from the opening kickoff of the 25-26 season, and we continue with our divisional previews, which brings us to the AFC East, and with the Bills, Patriots, Dolphins, and Jets. Let's start, Kieran Boyle, with the winners of the division last year and heavy favourites to repeat, the Buffalo Bills. Is there any reason why the Buffalo Bills won't be taking the division crown this year? I've got to say, I find it hard to see past them.
Yeah, I would as well. I mean, we've talked in the past about the Niners having a window. This has to be a closing window for the Bills. I mean, if you have to think if McVay can't get over the line this time, there'll be a lot of questions in Buffalo. But everything's set up for them. They've got a decent wide receiver room. I wouldn't say spectacular, but serviceable players. They picked up Josh Palmer. You got Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and you still have James Cook that you just signed. So everything's looking good for the Bills. Now, what I will temper that with is there's a lot of reactionary. We're in a very, very reactionary league, and getting the brakes blown out by 38-0 by the Bears really puts a halt on all the kind of optimism in Buffalo. But again, that's preseason. Columns got to be filled, and there was a lot of questions asked about the Bills after that performance. I am concerned about the secondary. I think there's been questions about the secondary for quite a while now between Cole Bishop. Hamlin struggled against the Bears as well in preseason. But when you look at this team, they've been there so many times. This has to be the year, or it's got to be the year that they get over the line. They've been hit by the Chiefs so many times. I think it was 20, 21, 23, and then last year. It's got to be – this has to be a combination of the Chiefs maybe in a down year and the Bills really pushing the chips all in. Josh Allen, the reigning MVP, everything is going in their favor. New stadium's going up. Josh Allen is the toast of not only Buffalo but of the NFL. My only question really, or my only concern with this team is, like I said, the secondary. I do like the front four. Rousseau, Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver. You would worry if any of those guys get injured that it might affect things. But that division, I mean, it's not a difficult division at this stage. They've spent 2 decades trying to fight off the Patriots, and now they've got it to themselves. So, and you add Joey Bosa in there as well on the edge. Everything is primed for them, and I don't see anybody. I mean, they're not looking at the division; they're looking way further afield. And I think between Josh Allen just improving year on year and turning into the superstar that he is, and that O-line is going to protect him real nice with Dawkins, McGovern, and Osiris Torrance. That's three absolute rocks right in front of him. So to answer your question, I don't see the Bills having much difficulty in the division. But that's not what they're aiming for. This has to be Super Bowl or bust because you have to think McVay's been wobbly the last couple of years. There's been a couple of questionable games, questionable calls, questionable results that he's been overseeing. And, you have to think that if they don't get over the line this year, then there will be some calls for him to move it along because they've been so close so many times. And, you don't want to have that situation kind of like in other teams and, especially the Joe Burrow talk is going on now that you're going to waste – players in their prime, and you really should be building blocks around them to get to the big game. So I expect Buffalo to get to be in the there or thereabouts once it all comes down to it. So for me, no real obstacles in the division, but they're looking for January football, not for September, October football.
Brian O'Leary, it's interesting that this team gets its season underway with a game against the team that it finished against last season, which of course was the Baltimore Ravens. It was the Ravens season that finished, not the Bills season in that game. But that's gonna set the tone for whichever team wins, and it's also going to set the tone for whichever team loses. As Kieran Boyle rightly said, the Bills aren't really going to be, you can't imagine, particularly concerned about what's around them in the division. It's January football that'll concern them. But that could put the pressure, as Kieran was saying, on Sean McDermott quite early in the season, and will potentially lead to question marks if they don't get off to a fast start about whether they've done enough. They had a swing and a miss on Von Miller when they thought they were one player away. Yeah, they've brought in Bosa, and that makes a big difference on the defensive side of the ball. But they've been kind of, and the GM Bean was defending them in the offseason, a very entertaining interview, saying, look, they had one of the most explosive, highest scoring offenses in the NFL last year. For all the people were saying, oh, why you draft a wide receiver? Why didn't you give Josh Allen help? He doesn't appear to need it, but that doesn't mean that the questions won't start coming pretty quick if they don't get off to a winning start and keep it going.
I don't think you can underestimate the enormity of that week one game. Connor, we spoke last year about how quickly the Chiefs, I wouldn't say secured the 1 seed, but they go and beat the Ravens week 1, they beat the Bengals week 2. We spoke about it at the time. These games are huge because of what Kieran has touched on. These teams are not about winning divisions, they're about winning titles. And the Ravens and the Bills will rightly see themselves as the real threats to the Chiefs, or even maybe at this stage even ahead of the Chiefs. Obviously, the Chiefs are having a lot of, I suppose, conversations. They probably don't see it in-house, but there's a lot of rumor mill speculation. This Chiefs team won't be at the same level in which we've seen previously. And this is an opportunity for these two teams to get a jump on them, get a march on each other. And this playoff and this seeding is so huge come January. And for the Bills, if they were to capture the 1 seed, in saying that, 2 years ago, they had the opportunity to beat the Chiefs at home and they couldn't do it in the playoffs. So it doesn't necessarily always play out that way. The Bengals went in there a couple of years ago in that snow game and beat them. So, look, you do want to have the game in front of that chaotic crowd in which we see in Buffalo year in, year out. And I think they've done some nice things. You know, the biggest one for me is James Cook. Getting James Cook secured. We're talking about wide receivers predominantly in this team, and Josh Allen's running with the ball. He's throwing the ball. He's playing with his hair on fire. But you can't underestimate the enormity of James Cook. If you recall, at the last January,
unless you're Sean McDermott, who didn't give him the ball when you would think it was James Cook.
But that's where I was going. He was the player. He was the stellar player in that divisional round game on that Sunday night in Kansas City. And yeah, on the final drive when they had the opportunity to win the game, they went away from what was working throughout the course of the game. And I think that might have ruffled Cook's feathers over the course of the offseason. You know, he wanted the contract, but he would have been wondering what the hell was going on there for him to be taken out of that situation. He's back. I think he's the stellar player outside of Josh Allen for them this year. I do like the Bosa pickup. My concern is he picks up injuries. Will he be able to go the full season? They are slightly aging in some positions defensively, but on when they're on their game, we saw against the Ravens how ultimately that playoff game came down to who was going to pick off the quarterback the most. They got the interceptions on Lamar. They didn't get the Ravens didn't get them on Josh Allen, and ultimately, with the exception of that last drive, that's what cost them the game. I think this Bills team are going to win this division. It's inevitable, I think. I think we're all going to pick them come September when we're doing our picks, but still not convinced they can make that final jump to the playoffs. I hope they do. I think it's long overdue. I think anybody who was in New Orleans last February would have loved to see the Bills play the Eagles. I think we would have seen a huge Super Bowl. I think we would have seen a much different result, but whether they're ready or not, I'm not entirely sure. Certainly win the playoff. Certainly be in the playoffs, win the division.
Yeah, I'm going to say if it's going to be, as I slightly suspect it will be, somewhat of a down year for the Chiefs, and it's between the Ravens and the Bills, I just trust Josh Allen more than I trust Lamar Jackson when it comes right down to it. I don't think you can pin any of the big losses that the Bills have had on Allen. In fact, I think he's been very unfortunate with coin tosses and poor play elsewhere on the team, which has let him down at times. And as we said, perhaps some questionable play calling, more to blame than anything else last year. I trust Josh Allen. We'll get to our picks in another podcast for Super Bowl and MVPs and all that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's going to be too much surprise that I'd have Josh Allen pretty high on my list and those. Kieran O'Donovan, how do you see it for them?
Yeah, I'm really only echoing points that you've made, and just to touch on what Kieran said about the secondary, and you mentioned Brandon Bean, and I know we're very complimentary here of GMs such as Les Snead and Howie Roseman, but Brandon Bean has quietly gone about his business, and the Bills in general over the last couple of years, they seem to have done very well to replace who would have been perceived as huge losses like Stephon Diggs and Jordan Poyer, and they haven't really missed a step in the regular season. They've gone and drafted 3 cornerbacks. So, like, if you look at their draft, they've gone cornerback, defensive tackle, edge, defensive tackle, cornerback, tight end, cornerback, and they're stocking up on defense. Maybe it's just by weight of numbers that they're going to try and fill the gaps that Kieran alluded to in the secondary. But yeah, and tight end is another area where I see a little bit of a weakness there on offense. I don't think they got much out of Kincaid last year. If they can improve in that area, then it is one of the most potent offenses, and it already is one of the more potent offenses in the league. We all know what Josh Allen can do. He seems to be able to do whatever he has to do to get to move the chains in big moments. Shakir was brilliant. Coleman was brilliant. They both looked great last year. Again, credit to Brandon Bean in getting James Cook signed. No drama. It just seems to be one of these organizations that's moving along quietly and going about their business in the off season. You mentioned Bosa. Can he be an impact player? Again, they've stocked so well around him. They don't necessarily need him to be an all-action player, maybe just an impact player at times. He may not take as many snaps as he did in San Francisco in San Diego and then LA. But no, I agree with you guys. I think they're the class of the AFC. I think, and you talked about the importance of week one. We always say that you can't win or lose season in week one, but this could very well be the tiebreaker for the number one seed and home field advantage. So I think both teams will really, really see the connotations of this game and really have it targeted as one they just simply have to win. So looking forward to that week one matchup and looking forward to watching the Bills this season.